I can translate this entire thing into Americanese. Okay, so imagine you're watching a movie, and the plot of the movie is this. We're in the Old West days, covered wagons and petticoats. And in this version of American history, the American government is fighting this big war. So the government goes around and starts promising to everybody this chunk of land that it thinks it owns out past the Mississippi. It announces publicly, anybody of this one specific ethnicity, if you guys are willing to help give us some money and give us your votes, then we'll give you ownership of this chunk of Oklahoma. It's this wild country. You can do whatever you want with it. It also promises to some Rockefeller types who live hundreds of miles away ownership of the thing if they help out. The American government also calls up France and promises to keep it empty after the war for some reason. They win this war. So now they got to make good on this promise. People of that specific ethnicity who are living in New York and Boston and Richmond, they all go out west. The rich fella goes out west. And lo and behold, they show up, and there's people already living there. There's native folk that are already living in this chunk of Oklahoma or whatever. Hundreds of thousands of people all showing up at the same Airbnb thinking that they are the ones with the exclusive rental. Everybody calls up the government and says, what's going on here? And the American government says, make it work. And for like 30 years, people try. They say, we'll take this bit over here. The native folks will take this bit over here. You guys can run the port. We'll run the schools. Your kids can't come to the schools, but maybe they can in certain circumstances. In the middle of everyone trying to settle out who owns what and runs what, a war breaks out back on the East Coast, and the families of these people, these settlers of this specific ethnicity, get absolutely brutalized. So the settlers are calling those family members back in the Atlantic coast and saying, just get out, come out here, there's no war out here, live here, we'll figure it out. So like I said, people try to make it work for 30 years, it doesn't work out. And finally the settler people say, you know what, screw it. We're going to round up all the native folks and we're going to put them on a reservation. We're going to wall up the reservation. We're going to control what goes in and out. We're going to make them poor by restricting them. And the settlers pull it off through coercion, through force, through purchasing chunks of land, through leaving whole native families massacred in mass graves. But they managed to do it. And the American government back home, it helps them out. Gives the settlers some cavalry. Gives them some money. Meanwhile, the native people who are living on the reservation, they're not having a great time. They can't participate in the rest of the world's economy. They can't look for jobs outside of the reservation. Every once in a while, the settlers will just shut off their water or send in those cavalry guys to round up some troublemakers. The native folk can't build up a real military. They're not allowed to have weapons. They're not allowed to have military establishments. They're not their own country, but they're not their own country. And this shit goes on for 80 years. There's all sorts of talk about how do we end this reservation system. Maybe the reservation becomes its own nation. Maybe we just get rid of the walls and go back to the beginning. The native folk try everything they can think of. They try being violent. They try being nice. They try asking politely. They try making a deal. They try force. Anyway, one day, a band of native folks break out and start fighting with the settlers, and it's brutal. But just as a thought experiment, put yourself in the shoes of the people in this native militia. They have no weapons. They're not allowed to have weapons. They might have a couple of hunting rifles and some hand tools. If they want to kill 2 or 3 cavalrymen, that's going to be pretty hard to do. And it might just make like a one headline in the newspaper. But if they kill a farmer and his family, that's an easy get. And that's a big splashy headline. And that's it. That catches us up to today. People are always saying it's complicated, it's complicated. It's not complicated. Like, I don't understand how that plot is any more complex than like the Lord of the Rings movies. Understanding the political reality and the historical events is pretty cut and dry. What makes it feel complicated is you don't know how you feel about it. Like, ethically, morally, that sort of stuff. What's complex about it is how you feel about it. It's your emotional state. It's not your intellectual understanding.
Anyone who is depriving you of freedom isn't deserving of a peaceful approach.
So I'm a member of the Satanic Temple, and I don't make a ton of religious content on TikTok, But the Israel-Hamas war, conflict, genocide, whatever you want to call it, has got me thinking about, is there a unique perspective that Satanists can have when paying attention to this? And for temple Satanists, which I am, the one that I keep coming back to is the fourth tenet. The second clause on the fourth tenet says to unjustly and willfully curtail the freedom of another is to forego one's own. Put that another way, it's just saying you cannot call yourself a free person while you are trying to prevent somebody else from being free. I keep coming back to that. Like, how else is Israel going to exist except for in this state of perpetual conflict if it is going to be a nation whose entire existence is always predicated on the subjugation of another group of people? So how is Israel going to change Judaism? I'm not Jewish, so obviously I can't think about this question from like the Jewish perspective, right? But I am a literate person with an internet connection living in the 21st century who has a brain and is using it to think about right and wrong. So from that perspective, I absolutely could think about this question. So I'm not coming at this question from like, does Judaism survive Israel? I'm just asking, how is Israel going to change all of those institutions, or the big institution, umbrella institution that we refer to as Judaism? For example, right after desegregation, right, American Christianity, particularly Protestantism, but also Catholicism, makes this Faustian bargain with conservative culture politics. And you end up with that 700 Club generation, right? An entire generation of these heretical pastors that cook up this blasphemous type of theology of homophobia, of sexism, of low-key racism, but not segregationalist, anti-abortion nonsense, all this shit. Pretend that that's coming from the Bible, create this fake theology to help carry water for conservative culture politics. And yeah, in the short term, it rockets those pastors to like the fame and attention. It gets them those powers and principalities that they're after. But now we're sitting here like 2-3 generations later, and what's the vibe, right? Christianity is in crisis. We're bleeding membership. People are embarrassed to say that they're a Christian. Judaism, like the big umbrella institution, ties itself up with this concept of Israel as a 21st century colonizer ethno-state, trying to create a low-key theocratic 100% colonizer ethno-state in 1948 or 1917, whatever you want to start counting it from. Like, that was never going to work. That's not going to happen. It was never going to happen. That's not a thing anymore, right? Because I don't know if you need to be told this, but Israel is not a success story, right? It's in a permanent state of conflict, will always be in a permanent state of conflict. And the only reason it's a first world country is the US, the UK, a lot of Europe props it up. Like, we paid for it to be a success on the face, a phony success, to make some sort of weird political point. Like, my Gentile ass even realizes that, like, Israel has permanently and forever become a giant shame and stain on the narrative of Jewishness. Same way that fascism has become a shame and a stain on the story of Germany and Italy and Japan, and the way that slavery and Indian subjugation has become a permanent stain on the history, the story of the United States. And we might be a generation or two still away from it, but there's going to be a reckoning.
And I also think that as a Jewish person, like, I was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel my entire life. You know,
yeah.
They never tell you that. Oh, by the way, there were people there. They make it seem like it was just like they're sitting there the fucking doors open.
Hours for the taking.
Yeah, like it literally. They forget to include the fact to every young Jewish person, basically, like, oh, by the way, there were people there.
Well, they just want to make sure that you are frightened of your own survival to the point where when you get old enough, you will make sure that that money goes to Israel and that trees are planted and that you always speak highly of Israel, and Israel must survive no matter what.
I think, like, for Jewish people especially, who are thought, you know, who view themselves as progressive and who view themselves as analytical and who view themselves as people who ask a lot of questions and really challenge the status quo, like, you know, What are we doing?
200 Israeli hostages, but 10,000 Palestinian prisoners. Israel insists that Hamas is the de facto government of Gaza, and when civilians are captured by that de facto government of Gaza, we're calling them hostages. But if the Israeli government throws you into detention right now, that's a prisoner. My wife is a super smart lady, so I asked her, hey, in the real world, not in like language game world, but in the real world, what is the difference between a hostage and a prisoner? And her answer just was, well, prisoner implies guilty person, and hostage implies innocent bystander. I suppose theoretically you could say a prisoner is someone being held by a bureaucracy, and theoretically there's like rules and a procedure for getting that person out of the detention. But does that difference really matter? Like, I would rather be held hostage by the Care Bears than be sent to prison in El Salvador. You know what I mean?
The State Department has cited those numbers.
Has cited them in the past, but
These press conferences with John Kirby are wild. But here's a question that these reporters should be asking. I'm waiting for one of them to realize it, but they're not realizing it. One of these reporters has to ask Kirby, name a place in Gaza where Israeli intelligence has determined that there is no Hamas base. All militaries are constantly doing these things called risk assessments, threat assessments. The whole point of it is to figure out where to not put your resources, where to not waste your resources, because that's just as important as knowing where to use your resources. If he wants, he can give a vague answer. He can just say, they're not looking anywhere south of such and such a line of longitude or something like that. But ask where Hamas is not. If he doesn't have an answer, that's a war crime. And if he does have an answer, if Israel bombs that area later, you ask what changed? What was the new piece of information that you got that changed the assessment? And if he has no answer, war crime. If you live in a Trumpy red district like I do, and you want to harass your representative into doing the right thing when it comes to Gaza, here's how I did it. Tell your representative that their support for Israel is the same thing as support for the Biden administration. Do not appeal to libtard ideas such as compassion or humanity. Do not use woke-ass words such as humanitarian crisis. Republicans don't care about any of that shit. Just stick to the message that Zionism is Bidenism. Here's the email I sent my representative. I'm contacting you to encourage you to support H.R. Resolution 786 calling for the immediate de-escalation and ceasefire in Gaza. As someone who remembers 9/11 and went on to serve in the global war on terror, I have a hard time ignoring Biden's inflammatory comments and actions during this crisis. His Zionist grandstanding does extremist/terrorist groups recruitment work for them. Curtail this administration before things get irrevocably out of hand.
Condemn this terror attack by Hamas.
first and foremost, do you condemn?
Will you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Who gives a shit? Like, literally, who gives a shit? How could it fucking matter? I am not a college sophomore writing a 101 paper for an ethics class. I don't care. I am not a tiny French philosopher smoking clove cigarettes talking about Camus and Sartre. I don't fucking care. You lock people into prison for 75 years, 3-4 generations, give them no hope of getting out, no power, no life, no opportunity. What the fuck did you think was going to happen? This is justified, unjustified, condemnable, not condemnable. Doesn't fucking matter. It is inevitable. We are here. This is happening. It doesn't matter if you think it should or shouldn't be raining today. It's fucking raining today because that's how weather works. Don't take the bait on this question. It is a propagandist question for people manufacturing consent.
October the 7th was not a plot twist. Like, when you make people desperate, they fight back desperate. And I know that because that has literally happened at every moment in human history. That's how that goes down. Like, whether Hamas is in the right or in the wrong doesn't stop Hamas from being foreseeable, maybe even inevitable. I'm a goat, and I even know that. Come on, people. Use your brains.
You know, in one way, the fact that in 2023 some of our most successful final solutioneers are Israelis is actually kind of a big win for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Here's the email I sent my representative. I'm contacting you to encourage you to... I made a video where I showed an email that I sent to my representative about Gaza and it got removed for hate speech. So I appealed it. I pointed out that there is no hate speech in the video, and in fact, I am modeling the correct behavior when you have a political gripe. I am showing people and encouraging people and giving people ideas on what they can say if they want to contact their representatives. And I won the appeal. The video is back up. Now, I definitely used some spicy language in that video. I use spicy language in all my videos. I talk with spicy language. But that video that got taken down was easily the tamest thing that I've posted about Gaza. However, it was the video that I posted that got the most views. So I think that's probably why it became a target. Not what was in it, but just the fact that it went somewhere. TikTok does not tell you why your video got taken down, so I don't know if it got reported. I don't know if it was an automated thing. But I do give it props for restoring it. IDF claims that it hit 600 Hamas targets in a 24-hour period and 400 the day before. Bullshit that these are all legitimate Hamas targets. This is just shelling randomly into Gaza. Think about this. The entirety of Gaza is 140 square miles. All of Gaza is roughly the same size as the city of Detroit. So I want you to imagine you wake up one morning and you read in the news that in one weekend, the Detroit police raided 1,000 homes that were all absolutely pivotal, critical infrastructure to some drug gang, which is not a believable number. If you believe that, you'd have to be gullible or enumerate. In order to get to that number, you'd have to really be stretching the definition of legitimate target. They would have to be raiding the homes of just some guy who's an addict. They'd have to be raiding the home of a mom of some former gangbanger who's in lockup. Or the IDF thinks every square inch of Gaza is a Hamas base.